And so this is a very unique time in your career in that you are bringing on board a brand new fire engine. It really only happens a couple times in your career. So it's a really exciting moment when we put like a $750,000 fire engine in service. So the vehicle that's out there is worth, I don't know, is it 2 times my house, 3 times my house? It's an unbelievably sophisticated piece of equipment. All right, so who am I and why am I here? You've already had a class by John Keffer, who's the salesman that sold you the fire engine, but I am here to give you something else, something different than what he gave you. I'm Paul Spencer. I'm a master emergency vehicle technician. What is that? Well, the honest answer is I can take your brand new fire engine and with a really huge Boeing hanger, I can disassemble your fire engine into component pieces. Every single component. I can take the Allison transmission, break it out into 1,000 pieces. Your DD13 engine, break it out into 1,000 pieces. I can put it all back together again and not have any left over. That's essentially what a master EVT does, understands the components. I'm also a fleet manager, and so I help fire chiefs buy new equipment, inspect, maintain, and repair equipment, and also sell the equipment. So that's essentially why I'm here. But that's not really the important part. The important part is I really strive to create a safe environment for you folks to learn about incredibly expensive fire engines, how you can be operational. So I'm on the board of the Washington Fire Mechanics. Our motto is the finest supporting the bravest. We are the finest mechanics. You are the bravest. My whole job here today and in my entire career is to support you doing your job so that you understand the tools that you're using. Okay, so this class is actually a requirement of NFPA. There is, believe it or not, a standard on the program with which we train about our vehicles. NFPA 1451, Vehicle Operations Training Program. You are supposed to have a class on the new technology that's on the vehicles. That's exactly what this class is about. Yeah? Okay, question for you. This is a pop quiz. You ready? 5 minutes into it and you've already got a pop quiz. This is the dashboard of one of your fire engines. You're driving. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. You're staring at the dashboard. It has a check engine light. It has a caution triangle. It has, all the way over on the right-hand side, a weird, funky-looking ice cream cone on its side with weird zigzags in it. There is a very loud, audible alarm in the cab. Are you in service or out of service? You're allowed to talk. Is it in service or out of service? I promise I will none.
I'd say out.
Out of service. You got lights all over the place and alarms. The answer is no. You're very much in service. Yeah. To be perfectly honest, your new fire engine talks to you. It talks to you. This fire engine is talking to you with a serious voice. So let me, if you're willing to work with me just for 1 second, I need a volunteer okay, thank you so much. All right, now, no, you're just staying right there. So now, if you have something to say, what do you do in this class right now? If you have something to say, what do you do?
Raise your hand and say it.
Please raise your hand. That's a visual indicator that she has something to say. Excellent. What if I'm ignoring you, not paying any attention, and I'm talking over here? What do you do when you really need to say something?
Wave your hand back.
Wave your hand. Excellent. That's a heightened visual indicator. And then what do? You use your voice. That's an audible indicator. Okay, so I have a visual indicator. Here you go. I have a visual indicator over here that says, excuse me, I'd like for you to check your engine. Oops, I'm going backwards. Hold on. I have a visual indicator. I'd like for you to check your engine, please. Please use caution, right? And then this one over here is a visual indicator, and it's actually blinking at us. It's blinking at us, and it's really wanting our attention, but you're still ignoring it, so it turns on an alarm. Instead of, excuse me, the only way it can communicate is with a beep or a beep, 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 beep. So this is just communication. So this class is about to teach you how your fire engine wants to communicate with you, right? And then ultimately, what our expectation is for you to respond to it, how to respond to it, and how to take it kind of seriously. What am I supposed to do when it's talking to me? Okay, but first, you'll notice quite quickly that I'm a little different. And I work in a lot of different scenarios. I work for the Forest Service, and I happen to be the guy that when the world catches on fire in eastern Washington, and there's 500 fire engines out there, they call me in to manage the fire engines. So if ever you're on deployment, you'll probably see me in my truck at that fire. One of the things I have learned through working with the Forest Service is a couple of interesting things. And I'll jump right into this. When you create an environment where 19 firefighters can consciously go to their death on a wildland fire, it gets everyone's attention. How can we have a scenario where you can get an entire hotshot crew wind up dying on a fire in situations that are watch-out situations, right? And the honest answer is, if there isn't good communication, many times we can get ourselves into trouble, right? And so I learned a really important thing. So essentially, for learning to occur, it has to be a safe place, a safe environment. In order for good communication to occur, it has to be a safe environment for that communication to occur, right? So ultimately, if you're learning how to walk a tightrope, the best place to do it would not be on over a tank of sharks, right? And so one problem we have in the fire service is people don't want to ask questions because they think there's a shark sitting next to them that might make fun of them and all that, right? So this is a pretty heavy topic that I'm starting out our class with, which is a bit of a challenge. But here's the thing. If you have a question in our class, trust me, there are no sharks swimming here, right? And so honestly, you have to be able to ask questions in my class. This is not a monologue, right? This is not a lecture. This is a discussion. And in a discussion, everyone needs to be able to have a voice so they can ask the question. Okay, you'll only ever hear that once, but please, please, please ask your questions. Okay, what we're talking about today specifically, and also any other question you might have, is the vehicle data recorder. You have a black box on board. I believe you should know exactly what data it's collecting, right? You have airbags and supplemental restraint systems. We're going to talk all about that. Things are going to explode when you roll your vehicle. You have electronic controls, not many. ABS, we'll talk about it. Boy, do you have emissions. There is emission systems on these fire engines that are complicated, and you really need to know how they work. I am also going to ask you to change the way you start your vehicle and shut down your vehicle. And it's critically important, and I'm going to explain why. We'll go through all the unique equipment that's on board. There are specific inspection points on these engines that differ. We'll talk about that. And then also we have a new app, a vehicle inspection app called Halligan. And we're going to go through that, log you all on, and show you how it works. That's what our class is about. Okay. Vehicle data recorder, NFPA requirement. It's a black box just like that's on Boeing 737 MAX airplanes and everything else airline related. So we've had black boxes for a long time. And me personally, I believe you as a firefighter need to know the data that we're capturing. So there's a law or whatever that says we put up a sign when we know there's a camera for your vehicle traffic, right? So that you can slow down. Well, guess what? I am that sign, and I'm telling you, you have a black box on board, and this is what I can see. So I can see seatbelt compliance, yeah, down to the second of every minute that that vehicle is alive. I went back to November when they were delivered to you folks. I wanted to figure out when they were delivered, and I saw when the delivery driver sat in the driver's seat to drive them here, right? And so I can see that easily, very, very easily. And so you know, if we look at your duty log, we know which firefighter it is sitting in the back seat. We know which firefighter is sitting where. So we now know who is sitting in what seat and whether or not they're wearing their seatbelt. It's just reality. That's the NFPA requirement. Why? Because 10 years ago, a large number of firefighters were dying when their vehicles left the roadway because they weren't wearing seatbelts. That's the honest answer. Today, people are wearing their seatbelts, and we have many fewer fatalities because, for the most part, people are wearing their seatbelts. Okay, what else it monitors is many other data points. But taking a look at it, this data is a little bit different. We have been running into problems with our seatbelts, yeah? And so there is a program inside the black box which is there to prevent you from cheating the seat, right? Leaving your seatbelt attached, connected, nobody in the seat, and then you sit down, no sweat. Nah, they're smarter than that. So there's a lot of different things inside the programming to be able to catch you from cheating. One of those aspects is very frustrating. So this is what it looks like inside. It just gives us information of how during a time period. You can see for this one the time periods. It shows us our trips, how many times it was parked, in other words stopped with the parking brakes on, responses. It knows responses because it's monitoring your red lights, right? It's your emergency master. It's monitoring that on scene. That's when your air brakes are applied and the emergency master is left on, and non-emergency travel, driving around without your emergency lights on. So it's gathering all of those data points. It is capturing time, hours, minutes, and seconds. It's capturing the speed with which you're driving, averages, maximums, distances. It knows how much time you're spending at each individual mile per hour. It's also looking at the vehicle, the maximum RPM, average idle RPM, throttle position. So the throttle position is what we call throttle request. So like the black boxes, at any given point, we can see that you are foot to the floor requesting 100% throttle. And we'll know exactly how fast your vehicle's moving and all of those things. Ultimately, this class is not about right, wrong, or indifferent. This class is about, hi, I'm the traffic camera. This is what I'm looking at. So these stage events, you can just see the interlocks that are required. It is what it is. It also is identifying for us ABS events. It's logging ABS events. So these were the conditions. At this moment, the anti-lock braking system activated for this period of time. So it is very detailed. So a graphic representation of that data looks like this. So for a given time period, we select the time periods, whatever it is, and the data points are over on the right-hand side. So we have graphs. It's monitoring all the seat belts, but throttle position, brake apply, ABS events, all of that stuff. So ultimately, it can be a useful tool for us to show that you are wearing your seat belts. And so when you are wearing your seat belts and we tell your insurance company ultimately, hopefully maybe they can give you better insurance. Now, you're afraid this is going to be used maybe as a disciplinary thing towards you. Sir?
So my question is not necessarily that, but
Yeah.
like with the malfunction that we're having with it now.
Yeah.
How does that affect this? So if the computer says, you weren't wearing your seatbelt, but we were, because the thing's beeping when you put it on, it turns off when you take it off.
Yeah.
When you put it on.
Yeah.
Like what, how does,
Yeah.
is it a redundance? Can you tell if we were actually wearing it or not, even when it's telling you you're
Yeah.
not?
And so I think your question was, when there is a failure of the system, how do we document all that? And I assure you this, before I leave today, I will have the sensor reconnected to that seat, and your seatbelt system will be working fine.
Is that
Yeah.
a problem in the rear too?
In the rear is the harness that's disconnected.
Okay.
Yeah.
Officer's seat.
I verified the officer's seat belt last night, and it's working fine.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, obviously, when there's a failure, things go into a limp mode that are outside of the normal box. So I can't really talk to that. But I promise you that I'll have the seatbelt systems working before I leave today. Yeah. So let me tell you this. Yes, it could be used as a disciplinary tool, but the only time I've ever used it is as a defensive tool of the driver. Recently at a fire department, there was an incident where a rear axle exploded because of a diff lock switch. And we'll talk about the diff lock switches. But I went into the black box and documented that the driver was operating incredibly safely, very safely within the box. All seatbelts were worn correctly, speeds were beautiful, throttle requests were very minor, and all those different things. So I have used this black box as a defensive for the drivers, documenting the drivers are driving safely. There was a minor issue of the diff lock switch was active when they were in a full lock turn, right, which is a challenge, right? But so please understand the black box is documenting data, and I'm about the only person that can pull the data, and the only time I'm ever really pulling it is in defense of a situation rather than a penalizing one. But wear your seatbelts is the answer. Okay. All right. You have airbags. Boy, do you have airbags. You have a ton of stuff on your vehicle. Now, your driver's steering wheel has an airbag just like your car. The officer's seat has a knee bolster just like a Hyundai, I think. There is a seatbelt pretensioner for all seats. And there is also a suspension system. These are air ride seats. And so the suspension system will collapse in an event. So let's talk about that. Oh, you also have a curtain. Driver and officer have a curtain bag. Okay, so let's talk about these. Seatbelt pretensioner, you know about them in cars. You have one. So the receiver portion of the seatbelt is over on that far side, and this is a tube, and you can see the tube right here that's sitting at the base of the back of the seat. And so when it fires, these straps are yarded underneath the seat, and they pull a cable that's here, that's right in the middle of the seat belt, and it yards it straight down. So what it's doing is it's just bringing this closer like that. So seatbelt pretensioner. I noticed on your rig yesterday that you've got a vest jammed right where this system is. This yellow harness is for the airbag systems, and they are very fragile. I have lots of experience of how they're fragile, and if you continue to store stuff behind the seat, you'll destroy it, guaranteed. I have experience. My request is this. Take your vest and actually put it on the side of the seat, right next to the seat, right? Drivers would be right to your right, and officers would be just to your left. Please leave the harnesses back there completely untouched for their happiness and longevity and all that good stuff. All right, So the driver and officer have an air ride. You can see the scissor there. It's actually here, an airbag. And as those straps are pulling in really, really hard, it's collapsing the seat down and collapsing that bag. I don't know if the airlift bag in the seat will actually explode when that activates. I don't really know. But I do know it'll be very noisy inside your cab. And so what it's doing is it's trying to bring the seat down. The reason why is this is normally in a rollover situation where the roof is collapsing in, and they want to get you as low in the vehicle as possible to give you greater head clearance. Okay, side roll protection system. So what to expect? If your vehicle is going around a corner very quickly and it slides off the bank and starts to roll over, this is what you will be expecting. It can be a slow, very slow event, but ultimately what happens is all of your seatbelt pretension is fire. That's the 2 seats in back, 2 seats in front. Seatbelt pretension is fire, so your seatbelt is pulled hard against you. The front seats will get pulled down in by your seatbelt and also a tether that's on your seat. So it's going to really grab you inside that seat very hard. And you'll have the air curtains for the driver and officer pop out. In the back, your head is not close enough to the doors or windows or anything, so you do not get a curtain. You just get a seatbelt pretensioner. That's in a side roll. In a frontal impact or basically off to the side, an oblique impact, you'll get all of that, but it'll also add the driver's steering wheel airbag and the officer's knee bolster. Yeah? The driver's knee bolster is right there. You can see where it says SRS. You can see where your computer mount is directly above it. And it will deploy out 4 inches below and 4 inches above into an area about that large. Be aware. Yeah. So Pierce is aware of the fact that that computer mount is somewhat going to be affected by that bag deploying. So I think the object is we probably want to leave that computer pushed forward as you are driving around. Get your information. It's still in fairly close access, but if at all possible, I think you'd probably want to leave that computer slid forward. All right. Flying along. Questions about anything so far? All right. So your fire engines, the only technology we have as far as ABS and all those things are ABS. And it really is no different than your car. So in a technology transfer, 20 years ago, we had a huge challenge, technology transfer, because the drivers of fire engines in a panic situation would pump their brakes, right? For us, we take our brake pedal and we push it to the firewall and we hold it there. And that will be the fastest stop you do in your fire engine. Yeah? So, I love the brakes. They're on your fire engine. 22-inch discs. Oh my gosh. All right. 48,000-pound fire engine. Driving at 20 miles per hour. Lights and sirens. Approaching the intersection. Right? Your Opticom has changed it to a green. You're approaching at 20 miles per hour. Right? So entering into the intersection is someone who is trying to quickly text for a babysitter because their baby's screaming in the back seat. They don't notice that the lights have changed, and so they blow through the intersection. You, the driver, as you're approaching the crosswalk at 20 miles per hour in a 48,000-pound fire engine, you panic stop. You take the brake pedal and you hit it to the firewall. How many linear feet? How many linear feet will it take to stop your fire engine? 20 miles per hour. The width of my body, 6 feet. Wow! 6 feet. Your new fire engines stop much faster. Well, why do I know this? Because as a EVT, I test your fire engines every single time I do a service. I drive it at 20 miles per hour in your parking lot for the most part, and I take the brake pedal, I hit it to the firewall, and I see that it's still the same. It's 6 feet or 8 feet, something like that. Yeah, that's the width of your crosswalk. Shoom, Mrs. Smith flies right through. No accident, no nothing, right? We forget about it instantly. Yeah, I have a thing, a article out there that's basically safety is measured in inches of stopping distance. Buy the best fire engines, you stop in 6 feet. Now, if you wanted to save money and you buy drum brakes, that's 10 or 12 feet. That would have been an impact on that vehicle. If your mechanics aren't doing their job well and they're not maintaining your brake system, that can be upwards of, what, 18 feet, 20 feet, right? We're allowed to sail right through the intersection. You know, the length of the fire engine, we're allowed many, many feet. And so ultimately, your fire department bought beautiful fire engines that stop really fast. ABS is one of the things that allows you to do that. Put your foot on the brake pedal all the way to the firewall, and you'll hear the brakes firing all over the place, but it will be the shortest stop, no matter the condition, on gravel, snow, ice, whatever it is. Okay. Now, emissions, exhaust. You have an incredibly expensive exhaust pipe. It is outrageously expensive, and in fact, it costs more than a new car. Just the tailpipe, the exhaust pipe, all the stuff that's in there. Back many, many years ago, in the early 80s, our world began to change. The federal government came along and said they have to switch to ultra low sulfur diesel, back when no one had any idea why. Well, in the early 80s, they started to make a change in our trucking industry and our diesel industry, and that change we're still seeing today. So ultimately, it takes 65 model year 2010 trucks, 65 model year 2010 trucks equals one truck from 88. So what's coming out of the tailpipe of a truck from 1988 equals 65 vehicles combined together of 2010. Now in 2010, we've actually gone to 2017. So they're even cleaner. So it's now well over 100 brand new vehicles. So in fact, the exhaust that's coming out of your fire engine in the apparatus bay doesn't even need the hose anymore. However, none of us are going to say, yeah, don't connect the hose, because then you'll have my name and 20 years from now I'll get sued because I don't know, something. But the honest answer is they are so incredibly clean. So what does that mean? Well, in 1990, the diesel engine industry had to bring down their emissions down to 6.0 and 0.6. That's the big blue box. So you've heard tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, all that stuff. Well, the box just kept getting smaller. By 91, it was to here, 94 here, 98 here, 2004 here, and 2007 was to here, 2010 was to there. We're now at 2017. The 2017 requirements are less than 1 pixel. It would be a dot that you can't even see down there. Is that pretty cool? I remember as a kid driving along on the highway, and you're behind a truck and your eyes were tearing because of all the exhaust, and everybody was coughing. In a tunnel, it was murder. Nowadays, you can dry your hair in the exhaust pipe, and it's not a big deal. So what's coming out is nitrogen and water vapor. Yeah, I taught this class at another local fire department, and they took me to point, and they went, okay, They took their 5-gas monitor, and they put it right in the tailpipe. Yeah, and what they detected was less than the 8-hour PEL for an office. That's straight exhaust. Yeah, they're incredibly clean. In order to be able to do that, we've got a huge exhaust system that's insanely expensive. All right, this is the most important part of our class, to understand the exhaust system. Number one, it works phenomenally well. It's great. It's fantastic. I love it. Ultimately, what I want you to know is because it's flashing lights at you and it's trying to talk to you about its needs, your vehicle has needs that need to be addressed, you need to be able to hear what it's saying. So don't be worried that it's talking to you. Your intervention on this system, i.e. regens, is not very frequent, and it is pretty much not a big deal at all. We do know that the major problems we do have with the emissions system is normally operator driven. So not technology driven, but operator driven for the most part. Okay, communication. What's it saying? So we have a check engine light. Yeah, that's this one in here. Check engine. So that light goes on when there is a issue with your engine or your after treatment controls, which are engine related. That light will turn on. So this is our request. All right, I see that light. It's talking to me. I'm going to have to tell somebody. But this is our request right here. You're in service to the end of your shift, and then you swap out. Just because the light turns on doesn't mean you have to freak out or anything. You basically realize that there's an issue. You have to document that issue, and then you'll swap out that rig with another available rig. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. So the stop engine light, that is that one, is red in color. Any indicator that's red in color, we have definitely increased the severity of our communication. And so stop engine says major engine fault that may result in engine damage. So that light comes on when I forget to put oil in the engine, or when your oil filter is knocked off, or the oil pan bolt falls out. When you lose oil pressure, that light comes on. And very soon after, we seize the engine. That light also turns on with some emissions-related things, where the tailpipe has plugged so much that exhaust is not able to get through it. And we're about to destroy the diesel particulate filter. So our request is, when you see a stop engine light, you move to a safe location and shut down the engine. Yeah? So communication, your action. So the ice cream cone with a thermometer in it means that your exhaust temperature has reached 977 degrees or above. And it's communicating that to you, so you make sure that the chief doesn't park right next to your tailpipe or whatever it is. That you will see that sometimes when you're pumping or when you are driving sometimes, and you'll always see it when you do regeneration, when you do a regen. Yeah, and it's just telling you the exhaust that's coming out is a little hotter than normal. Normally, diesel exhaust is not very hot. All right, and so the one here with the ice cream cone to the side and what looks like a box is their symbol for the diesel particulate filter. Now that's the one we really need to pay attention to. And it will turn on to get your attention. It will blink to tell you it's getting a little bit more serious, and then other things as it goes along. But those are the icons. Does anybody have any questions about any other of the icons that are on the dashboard? We've got a lot of icons. But otherwise, check transmission, air resistance, that's a plugged air filter, auxiliary brake overheating, water and fuel, caution, major issue, really serious, seat belt, parking brake on, stop engine, your rack is down, hot exhaust, diesel particulate filter. We've got others. Is there anything? Go ahead.
What's the procedure if the caution light goes on? What can you expect to
Yeah,
be wrong?
that is a wild card. To be perfectly honest, I do not know the answer to your question. Yeah, that is a wild card that has just popped up on our dashboards. I really need to find out from Pierce what it is. So we had that wild card pop up when we had a need for a regen a couple of days ago. So that's just a generic caution. So that's a generic light that comes on. Now remember that check engine is engine or after treatment. I believe that that caution is connected to all the other systems. Connected to your airbags, connected to your multiplex system and all that stuff. So if another system other than the engine and the after treatment is got an issue, then it'll turn that light on to get your attention to one of those other systems. That's my guess, but I don't know for certain. What else?
The water and fuel, is that something we can take care of ourselves? Because I'm like, I'm more for, I think the water and fuel, whoever needs to, what that cost, and
Yeah, and great question. And on your Ford, fantastic. And on our rigs, you will never see that light. If you happen to see that light, yes, how we would start to address it would be to drain the water out, yes, and it doesn't take much training to do that. However, that's an indicator that something massive has occurred, something massive. Somehow water has gotten into the fuel system. One drop of water into an injector will explode the injector. It will just blow the tip right off of it, and your very expensive fire engine will be out of service. So if that light were to turn on and you were to notify the chain, I would say instantly shut the engine down. I don't care where you are. Okay, where are you? Let's figure this one out. Because water pushed through the fuel system will cause massive damage. So yes, the treatment of the light is the same. However, the way we look at simple stuff sometimes is a lot different than you might expect. Yeah, so yeah. What else? All right. What have we got? So let's talk about regen. And let's talk about the exhaust system and how it's going to communicate with you, right? Remember in the beginning of the class, I said it was in service. You guys were going, wait, out of service, rightfully so. Well, let me explain how it starts to communicate to you. So you have an exhaust pipe and it has a diesel particulate filter in there. It's essentially a catalytic converter. You've had a catalytic converter on your gas engines forever. No one's worried about the catalytic converter. Well, there's no real reason to worry about your diesel particulate filter. The difference between a catalytic converter on a gas engine and a diesel particulate filter on a diesel engine is the diesel engine doesn't produce enough heat to burn off the soot. Sometimes we have to generate that heat in different ways. Now, as a semi-truck is pulling a very heavy load over the pass, over the Cascades, it will generate enough heat to just burn off the soot that's in that diesel particulate filter. At full load, at wide open throttle, it's just going to create enough heat and it'll just burn it right off. That's called a passive regen. No one has done anything. The diesel engine is working so hard that it will build up enough heat that the soot inside starts to light off, just cook. It cooks right off. There is one time in our operations of our fire engines that could occur. You don't pull the pass. Well, if you were on deployment and pulling the pass, that might happen. But in your normal day-to-day activities, you might actually get a passive regen. When would that be? At a fire. Yeah, the only place you can get a passive regen is when you're at a really heavy working fire. We know you've had heavy working fires. And the honest answer is, when your fire engine is there and it's pumping wide open throttle, really trying to pump large amounts of water, it's the equivalent of pulling a pass, right? It goes to wide open throttle and you're just sitting there. You might go into a passive regen. So on the dashboard, your exhaust light, temperature light might activate, right? It might be letting you know, oh, by the way, your exhaust is super hot. And so that's when you might do a 360 around your fire engine just to see what's happening with your tailpipe and who's over there or what's over there. Sir?
Sir, if you're at the pump panel and that happens,
Yeah.
is there any bell or anything that goes off to let you know you got
No.
to Yeah.
Yeah, no. And it's one of those things where if your fire engine's working really super hard, you need to kind of walk around it just to make sure everything is doing good, just as a normal course of business, is my guess. Yeah. So that's a passive regen. You'll probably never experience it. In the life of this fire engine, it probably will never happen. So what's an active regen? An active regen means that it's actually pushing an accelerant. We use diesel fuel into the diesel particulate filter. It's squirting raw fuel into the diesel particulate filter so it'll light off, literally catch fire and light off. Actively injecting diesel fuel and accelerant into the diesel particulate filter. No sweat, not a problem. So an active regen might happen again when the computers that are monitoring the diesel engine and also the exhaust after treatment systems, when it notices a situation, number one, the diesel particulate filter needs to regen. It realizes that the plug level on it needs to receive a regen, number one. And when that happens, a light turns on. That's this light right here. Whenever the monitoring systems see that the plug level is at a point where it needs action, a automatic active regen could occur because the diesel engine decides it will. So it'll start injecting diesel fuel into your exhaust system. Yeah. And so as you're driving your fire engine along, it's got to be hot, you have to need it, and they'll start putting fuel in there. But here's the thing, as soon as you drop below 8 miles per hour, it shuts down. Below 5 miles an hour, it shuts down. So when do you ever drive for 25 minutes at heavy throttle without dropping below 5 miles per hour? Never. It will never happen. So you're always stopping at a stop sign, right? So we'll never really get an automatic active regen. So typically, we have to do a manual regen. That's a parked regen, and that's driven by you folks. Yeah? So that's just the reality of it. Now, communication, let's talk about it. So the first thing that happens is the light turns on. And that's the first stage. Monitoring system says, yes, I've got enough of a plug that it needs to be addressed. And so when it goes solid, the light turns on. We have a need for an active regeneration. And so our request is you complete your current mission and then perform a regeneration in a reasonable amount of time, 8 to 10 hours. How's that? We can handle that. In my personal experience with the DD13 engine in our Pierce engines, we jump faster through our stages than 8 to 10 hours. My experience is that we will jump through those much faster. So me personally, I would prefer if you see the light come on, you address it as soon as possible, right? And so it's a bummer, but you're on a call, you do your thing, the light comes on, you come back to station. It's a little bit of a bummer to go ahead and have to park the vehicle outside and do a regen at 2 o'clock in the morning. Well, wait for the next shift. Tell them, hey, first thing you have to do a regen. Or do it yourself, and it takes about 45 minutes. Yeah.
So would the exhaust coming out be more harmful during regeneration then?
That's a great question. It is not more harmful. Yeah. And so you will never have visual exhaust, exhaust that you can see coming out of your vehicle. Like, you know the soot, you put your finger inside the tailpipe and it's black? You will never see anything inside your tailpipe. Rust. The pipe will be perfectly clean, absolutely clean. All you'll see is rust.
Don't get to roll coal then.
No, sorry, no. Wide open throttle, see the black? No, not happening. So not even during regen. Yeah. Sometimes you'll see water vapor, but so my request is you don't wait for the full 8 to 10 hours. You just do it. You just do a regen. So the vehicle will continue to plug. The diesel particulate filter will continue to plug. As it plugs to the next level, it'll start blinking the diesel particulate filter light at you. it'll be waving its hand. Hi, regen, please. And so when it starts blinking at you, we ask that you perform a regen as soon as possible. Yeah? So maybe not in the grocery store parking lot, you know. Maybe we take a moment and come back to the station to do the regen, but please do it right away, because the third stage is the check engine light comes on. And when the check engine light comes on, you get an audible, you get an alarm. And that's the condition I found your engine in, whatever day that was. And that was the picture of the dashboard with an audible alarm. So at that point, when you go to the third, obviously, you have to perform a regen. Now, if that comes on and you're in the grocery store, pull around behind the grocery store where you're not going to be in the eye of Mrs. Smith and do your regen there. Honestly, get it done. Because the next thing that happens is your stop engine light illuminates. And it says, move to a safe location and shut down your engine. When you shut down your engine, it will only restart in limp mode. So the red stop engine light comes on. You don't know that the oil hasn't come out of the engine. And so you're driving along. That means you pull over to the side of the road and you stop. You get out your telephone and you start calling. When the stop engine light comes on, you stop your engine. So if you do not do a regen and you get to that point, what's happening is we get to a place where even I am unable to push a regen. The only solution is I have to pull the diesel particulate filter out of the vehicle and take it to a place that can put it into a oven hot enough to burn it off, and maybe we won't have damaged it too much. Yeah, so better we act quickly up here so we don't get to that place there. Yeah.
Question about when you're running the regen and you say it takes about 45 minutes,
Yeah.
you get a call during that time.
Yes, great question. Spectacular question. And I've got a slide that I'm coming to.
Okay.
And the honest answer is, anytime, here, the punchline, anytime you jump into the vehicle and do anything, it will stop the regen.
Okay.
The moment your foot goes on the park brake, the regen stops. You turn off the engine, it stops. Everything makes it stop. So
Just restart when you're back.
you'll just restart when you come back. You'll probably still have the lights and the alarms that it had. It doesn't reset those until it completes. So you'll probably still be in those lights and alarms. Yeah. So you've got a couple of switches. You have a DPF regen switch with a yellow light, and you have a regen inhibit switch. Why do we have them? The lower left. It's right, your battery switch is right here. This switch is your switch. That's the switch. The yellow light turns on when the diesel particulate filter light turns on the dashboard. It's directly connected. So when that light comes on, this light comes on. And so you press and hold that button for 5 seconds and it goes into regen. Yeah? Regen inhibit is a terrifying button for me. It used to be a toggle on off, and people that didn't know would actually flip that switch. And it prevents the vehicle from ever regenning. And it guarantees that we plug our diesel particulate filter and cause lots of problems. So why would you have that button? What is the one scenario where you can have an automatic regen occur? While pumping on a fire. That fire, the one where the fire chief just parked right next to you, right at your tailpipe and ran off with his keys. I'm beating up on the chief, sorry about that. But when there's a situation that you cannot change, and you realize if you get your exhaust temperatures up into the 1,000 or 1,200 degrees, you're going to create a problem, then what you do is you come over and you just hit that regen inhibit switch. You just hit it. Whatever it is, if something is there at your tailpipe and you're pumping, then you can hit that so that you don't go into regen. Now, most times you will never find a situation where going into regen while pumping is ever an issue, right? Because you always have exhaust and you always make sure that nothing's really in your exhaust. But that switch is there for that weird situation where you just got to make sure you don't get hot exhaust. Yeah?
Do you recommend only regenning when the yellow light turns on, or can people do it whenever they feel it's necessary?
That is a smart question. And the only person that can do it when they think it's necessary is me with a very expensive computer. I have to hack into it, and I have to get into the Detroit software and tell it, no, 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 I know more than you do. I want you to regen. Otherwise, the only time anyone can ever do a regen is when the light is on. Yeah. What else? Sir?
Any concerns with the regen exhaust, the heat being so hot that when we are, say, pumping a fire and people are coming to get equipment?
Ah, great question.
So,
Yeah. So let's talk about that specifically. When your vehicle is in regen, it is your responsibility to ensure the safety of others. That's pretty basic. And when we're doing it out here at the fire station, we want to pull out cones and put cones by the exhaust so it forces people to walk not directly next to it. It will cause a burn. If you were wearing shorts and you were to walk right next to the fire engine, it could actually burn you, right? That's very hot exhaust. We have learned, don't use one cone in the path of the exhaust, use two on either side of the exhaust. Okay, so when you're on that fire, it still applies. Yeah, so it is taking a long time for our fire service to appreciate the fact that our exhaust is now very hot. And so I think that if you can support your firefighters to throw some cones around your exhaust, so maybe other people won't park right next to you, even though it's an ideal parking spot, or something like that, that would be a really good thing. What else? All righty.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
How long at a fire, when you're pumping,
Yeah.
should you expect? Since you have no warnings on the pump panel, should you expect it to go into regen?
Let's see here. Your question is,
You would have to put it in the regen once the light comes on. I guess it could be passive, I guess.
yeah, so we're actually at a good place here. You're talking about regen and a active automatic regen or a active manual regen, the two differences. So an active automatic regen where you haven't hit the button will only ever occur when you're driving or when you're pumping.
Yeah.
Automatic, right? Not hitting the button. It will only ever happen when you're pumping. So I've only ever heard of that happening a couple of times, ever. Pumping hard enough. Now, pump testing, when we do pump testing and you're running it for a significant period of time at full capacity, you betcha. Rig's going to regen all the time, right? Now, a very heavy working fire where you're there for 45 minutes pumping, wide open throttle, yeah, it'll go into regen. And again, it's just not a worry. Just make sure nothing comes in contact with the exhaust and it's just not a problem. Sir?
When you manually regen, is it on a time cycle? If you're throwing around 45 seconds, or I'm sorry, 45 minutes, is it going to run 45 minutes every single time?
Guys.
Or is it just going to do what it needs to?
Yeah. And so the answer is, it is incredibly sophisticated. There are many different pressure transducers in the system, so it will only fire for as long as it needs to in order to get it with a clear passageway through the diesel particulate filter. So 45 minutes is kind of a silly wild-ass guess average. I've seen them happen as fast as 20 minutes, right? The firefighter who, the moment the light turns on and just hits it, oftentimes they're rewarded with a 20-minute or 25-minute regen. When you went to the third stage just recently with one of your new engines, it took me 45 minutes. Upwards of an hour when it's really badly plugged. One of your rigs actually got to stop engine light. And when it went to stop engine light, one of your new Pierces, it took me a little over an hour of regen to burn that thing off. Yeah, that's pretty impressive. But what normally happens is it's normally you come in to do a rig check, you come on shift, you come to do a rig check, and imagine that, the light is on. Ha, go figure. And so you go ahead and initiate your regen, you put out your 2 cones, and then you go get a cup of coffee. You finish your rig check, right? Not a problem. How to stop the regen with the active automatic is you have to hit that defeat switch, right? But for manual regen, when you've hit the button and then something happens like a call, you place the transmission in gear, it automatically turns it off, you release the parking brake, you hit the inhibit switch button, or you stop the engine. All of those will just turn it right off. So you don't even have to think about it. When the alarm goes off, just respond. No thought at all. I'm going to ask you to change your behavior. Ha! It's rough. I'm going to ask you to change how you go about your work and the way you do stuff on your fire engine. So a startup procedure. All the time I hear from firefighters, I've been doing it this way for 20 years and I've not had a problem. Well, I'm here to tell you, we've had some changes in 20 years and we are having problems. If we do doing the same thing, it causes problems. So 20 years ago, there was not a computer on your fire engine. How many computers are on your new fire engine? Well, you know the one that's on the slide that you interface with, but there is now on yours probably over 30 computers. I'd have to really do a study. But it used to be, we used to say a dozen, but now with the multiplex system, we're up in the 2 dozen or something like that. We are trending an issue with computers failing because of how we start our fire engines. That's all there is to it. So last year, I had to replace 2 of the ABS computers at $5,000 a piece. I had to replace an Allison computer at $5,000. Funny, doesn't matter the computer, but the price tag is the same. Yeah, and Pierce, and this beautiful computer right here, it's more than $5,000. And they are telling you right up front, it will break if you don't start your fire engine correctly. So I need you to hear this, so I'm going to give you a little bit of detail. Now, almost anything I'm talking about, I can talk about for an hour. The reality is this, I only want to give you enough information so that you understand. I don't want to go out of control, but here's the thing. When your vehicle's driving down the road, the electrical system is at 13.8 to 14.2 volts. That's alternator voltage. You thought it was a 12-volt vehicle. It's not. It's a 13.8 to 14.2 volt vehicle. That's the voltage that we want in order for everything to work beautifully, correctly. That's fantastic. When the fire engine right now is plugged in the apparatus bay, it is at 13.8 to 14.2. On the monitor, you can see it. It's right in there at alternator voltage because that's the shore power going to the shore power charger that holds it at that voltage. That's where we want to be. Now, technically, you have 12-volt batteries on your fire engine. 12-volt batteries, when they are full, are at about 12.75 volts. When they are empty, they're at 12.0 volts. I've thrown a lot of numbers at you. The only thing that ultimately is happy at that range is your starter motor. Your starter motor is designed to run at 12 volts. Now, in FPA, long story short, we have to get our voltage drops down so your starter actually sees 12 volts. In many places, the starter motor only sees 11 or 10 volts, right? So when the starter motor is hit, your shore power ejects. We're on battery voltage. The starter hits it. The voltage inside the electrical system of the fire engine drops to 10, 9, maybe even 8 volts. So let me explain. You hit your battery switch. You hit your ignition switch. You push and hold the starter button. You do it all in one fell swoop. Boom, 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 like that. Every single computer, all 30 of those computers, are all booting up on 8 to 10 volts. because the starter motor, wang, 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 is bringing the entire electrical system down to 8 to 10 volts. None of the computers on board are designed to boot up at 8 to 10 volts. So let's go through this very specifically. The tones just went off. It's 2 o'clock in the morning as always, and you run out. You're driving the engine. You get into your boots, and you're all set. You put on your jacket, and you get up into the vehicle. You hit the battery switch, ignition switch, and you hit the starter all at once. What you've just done is browned out all of the computers. I'm only asking you to do one thing different. When you enter the apparatus bay and you come over to your fire engine, hit the battery switch and the ignition switch. Don't start it. And then just come down, get on your boots, get on your pants, get on your coat, and then get into the fire engine and sit down and start. Every single one of your computers are booting up at 13.8 to 14.2 volts, shore power voltage. They love it. They'll last forever. What do you think?
Good, but what do you do when you're parked in that parking lot someplace?
Yeah. You have groceries in your hand, and you're walking in.
Not plugged into shore power.
But you're not plugged into shore power. You have groceries in your hand. No sweat, no worries. And so you hit the battery switch and the ignition switch, and you wait for the amount of time it takes to boot up. Now, we know the ABS one, which has been the canary, which is the one that dies very easily, right? And that's the it just booted up. As soon as it cycles, it has booted. So that's 10 to 15 seconds. Give me 10 to 15 seconds. And that boot up happens at what voltage? Right around 12.6. You're sitting at the grocery store. The vehicle's been turned off. Many of the things are still running on the electrical system. You've dropped down about 12.6. Everything's designed to boot up at 12.6. No sweat. They are not designed to boot up at 8 or 10. Yeah, so give me a battery switch, ignition switch, pause for 15 seconds or more, and away you go. It's beautiful. Yeah. Questions? All right. So, shutting down is also incredibly important. Used to be that we'd drive along. You'd hit the door open, right? You'd back into your bay and you'd shut down. We've done that forever. Then we added exhaust hoses, so you had to stop for a moment to kick the rookie out, so go ahead and hook the exhaust hose, and then you backed in. Okay. Well, your very expensive diesel engine has a very expensive exhaust. There is a component of the exhaust called an EGR cooler. EGR is exhaust gas recirculation. We know that the exhaust gas recirculation cooler is fragile and that it will self-destruct if not treated well. If anyone has ever had a Ford 6-liter engine and they know that the EGR coolers are crap, I am here to tell you that the EGR coolers are not crap. How we drove them is we drove them just like a 7.3-liter diesel engine without an EGR cooler. And when we drive a vehicle that has an EGR cooler, like one that doesn't, the EGR cooler will be destroyed. So the destruction of the EGR coolers on your DD13 will be so much exponentially worse than the cooler going bad on your Ford. I ask you to do this. Please do not thermal shock your EGR cooler. What does that mean? That if your EGR cooler is hot, just idle it for 5 minutes. That's it. Idle it for 5 minutes. Your EGR cooler will go from 1500 or whatever, some incredibly hot temperature. It'll cool it down into the 500, 800 degree range so that it won't actually snap, crackle, and pop. If you were to listen like an EVT, like me would listen, as the fire engine backs into the bay and stops and releases. Have you ever heard an engine snapping, crackling, and popping? Guess what? That's an EGR cooler, or that is a component that is in thermal shock. It's being impacted negatively. If you can hear your EGR cooler, then that is a big problem. That's a huge problem. So how do you operate so that your EGR cooler is not negatively impacted by your operations and that is you got to give me a 5-minute cool down time. So as you're coming back from a call, coming back from whatever it is, as you spot your rig outside the apparatus bay, you shift the neutral, put on the parking brake, you confirm that the hot exhaust light is not on. If it's on, you sit there until the light turns off, and then at that point you get a 5-minute cool down time. But you attach your exhaust hose, you back in, and if you don't really move quickly, you're going to have 3 to 5 minutes of idle in that whole process. That's all I ask for, a 5-minute idle, right? And that should be enough time to allow your EGR cooler to cool down. So you went to the grocery store, you drove really hard, whatever it is, you hit the door opener, and as you're backing up to the apparatus bay, the moment at which you basically go to idle, 700, 800 degrees RPM, that's when the 5-minute timer starts. So if you really start to look, you'll see that you're not changing your behavior very much at all, right? You might pause outside of the fire station just for a short period of time, maybe a minute, to allow your EGR system to cool down, fire engine to cool down. Give me 5 minutes idle, at idle. All right, so specifically your exhaust pipe, this is theoretically a diesel engine. The fresh air is coming in, coming through a charge air cooler. It's super hot by the turbo, and it comes into the engine like that, and then it goes out through all of that exhaust. Catalyst chamber, particulate filter, selective catalyst reduction, whatever. This is where the DEF is blasted in. This is where the raw diesel fuel is pushed in. This thing right here, the one that they really don't want you to take a look at and see, is EGR. It's that thing right there that's going to explode if you don't idle down your engine. EGR cooler. All right, believe it or not, this is a picture of underneath your fire engine. So if you look at the fire engine from my viewpoint, which is sitting underneath it, your exhaust is coming down this way. It's coming into this huge diesel particulate filter dock chamber. It's coming across, all the way across the vehicle, and it's coming straight back up through here, hangs a U-turn inside the box, back out, and crosses back out like this. So this here is the pipe going this way, this here is the pipe coming back this way. So the exhaust goes all the way to the back of the vehicle, hangs a U-turn, comes right back to the front of the vehicle, a U-turn, and goes back again and out the side. That's a huge exhaust system. That's why it costs $40,000 or whatever it is. Makes it hard for me and my big size to slide under it nowadays.
So one quick question on the EGR cool down.
Yeah.
Is that every time, so even if we do like a 5-minute drive to do inspections, before we shut it down and go to do our inspections, the driver's gonna sit there for 5 minutes?
Yeah. And I'm asking you to be aware of the heat that's in your exhaust system.
Is there some gauge that tells us what the heat is?
Is there a monitor on your dashboard that shows your exhaust gas temperature? I don't believe there's an EGT on there. Yeah, so just be super aware is my request. Yeah.
Yeah, just leave it idling during the inspection.
Yeah, and the vehicle itself doesn't like idle. We're not really supposed to turn off our vehicle when we leave the fire station, except for something like inspections. And then you're allowed to turn it off, and the diesel engine would prefer you turned it off. The diesel engine is happiest when it's super hot and it's running really hard. It's really unhappy when it's sitting idling doing nothing. So, okay. Seatbelt monitor. The driver can see on their screen the status of the 4 seats. Green means compliant, red means not compliant, and they're able to see it right there. We have run into lots of problems where everybody knows that they're basically broken because they're alarming. So the Pierce setup on your vehicles requires a 10-second compliance. What that means is when you sit down in your seat and hit your seatbelt, you have to stay seated for 10 seconds. If you reach over like this to grab the shoulder strap of your SCBA, when you come up off of your seat a little bit to turn, you'll go into alarm. You will not have 10-second compliance. When the system goes into alarm, it latches in alarm mode. A latched alarm will have a red icon on the screen. The only way you can fix it is to disconnect your seatbelt and reconnect your seatbelt. So in your mind, you're saying, wait. So we're going down the road and we're in alarm mode, and you're saying that the firefighter has to disconnect their seatbelt and reconnect it? And I'm saying, yeah, in order to get out of alarm mode, do not drive down the road in alarm mode. In order to get out of alarm mode, you have to disconnect and then reconnect. Stay seated for 10 seconds. As soon as you have that 10-second compliance, you then have a 4-second freebie. You can come completely out of your seat. The seatbelts are beautiful. The officer can come completely out of their seat and reach over and do anything they want and come back down again. You have 4 seconds, right? If you violate the 4 seconds, if you're out for 5, it will go into alarm. It will latch in alarm, which means the driver will look over and go, yeah, Cap, that's you. Again. He'll have to disconnect and reconnect, right? And that will unlatch. 10 seconds at that point, sit there, don't move, and then once you've got your 10 seconds, it resets the 4-second, right? So you have a 10-second required compliance prove out, and then you have a 4-second timer to twist and turn, get your SCBA on, and all that good stuff. Violations will latch. To unlatch, just redo your seatbelt.
I have a question.
Yep.
It seems like this is for safety. Why would a firefighter be forced to unbuckle in order to have an alarm go off?
Great question. It doesn't make a lot of sense that we're setting up a system that would force a firefighter to unlatch their seatbelt.
Yeah.
And what I can tell you is that the systems for seatbelt compliance are the way they are because we're very smart as firefighters, and we have figured out every way in which we're going to attempt to cheat the seatbelt. And so ultimately, in the different methods that we've used to cheat the seatbelt, this is the system that they have come up with that for the most part you can't cheat. For the most part you cannot cheat this seatbelt. However, when it's latched in alarm, it will force you to unhook and rehook in about a 1-second maneuver. So, all right, multiplex. It's a multiplex system is a computerized system. Ford's been running it forever. Most vehicles today are a multiplex system. It means that a computer is running the electrical system. There's a hardwire system, which means that there is a wire that runs from the switch that your finger is on all the way back to the light bulb that it controls. So if it's a light on the tailboard of your fire engine, there's a wire that goes from the dashboard all the way back there. A multiplex system is a computerized system, which means that there is a computer that sits up there pretty much right next to your switch panel, and there's just tiny little wires that come over to that computer. And there's a little computer that sits all the way in the back of the fire engine, back left corner, and all the lights and all the things come with wires directly to it. There's one power cable and one ground that run to that computer. So everything is done digitally through a communication cable like what's sitting in the walls of your building. So now when you hit a switch, there is an input that goes into the computer. It knows what to do, and it turns on or off or does whatever. So that's a computerized system. You have a computerized multiplex system on board. This is your user interface on the dashboard for the multiplex system. And one of the things you'll notice right up front is it gives you all sorts of information, right? You can see graphically lots of data, but the thing that's going to irritate you the most is it's going to have a lot of alarms. When your vehicle was in alarm because of the plugged diesel particulate filter, the check engine was active with that Caution with the audible alarm. Audible alarms are a bit of a pain. And so I'd like for you to take a look at this. This is your home button. So this button relates to that icon. This is a touch screen. So you can either hit that button or you can hit that icon. Doesn't make a darn bit of difference. This Pages icon, if you hit that icon right there, you get different options that are down here. Lower right-hand side is to silence audible alarms. So let me say that again. If ultimately you're in a situation where you haven't done a regen for whatever reason, it's escalated up into the alarm modes of very rapidly surprising all of us, and you happen to be in a situation where you can't do a regen, but you'll do one very soon, you promise, to make everybody happy inside the fire engine, you hit Pages and you hit the audible alarm off, and that way they don't have to listen to the fact that the computer is saying, I have something to say, with an audible also. So that's how you turn off the audible alarm. A lot of messages will pop up like, Paul, you need to change the oil in your pump transmission. Have you seen that one? Yes, yes. That has popped up on both of your brand new Pierces. It'll say when I need to put grease in the pivot pins for your cab. My goal is for you to never see these prompts, but if you do, it's not a big deal. You just put into the Halligan app, hey, it's telling you to grease the pivot pins. So, communications. All right, we're almost there, I promise. There is an engine cooler valve on your pump panel. Please never use it. Please, never, ever, ever. Your fire engine wants your engine to be super hot, 220 degrees. Water boils at 212. It wants to be running at 220. Why does the engine want to be so hot? Burn off the exhaust. Yeah, it's running much more efficient, much cleaner at super high temperatures. If you open this up, you're going to cool the engine down and create a lot of bad exhaust. So you'll have to be doing regens all the time. Leave it off. Unless you have an alarm that says that the vehicle is overheating, then turn it on. Okay, quickly, running through a list of other stuff. DEF. If we go backwards here, you can see that this DEF, this is your diesel fuel at 3/4. What's the refill point for Bothell Fire? When do you put fuel into your engine? At 3/4. So you're almost at refill there. This is the diesel exhaust fluid, and it's at half. At what is the refill point for DEF? We have to create that. The diesel exhaust fluid reservoir is 4.5 gallons. It's the smallest reservoir on the face of the earth. It's crazy. Yeah, your new Ford pickup truck has like a 15-gallon reservoir or something. And this one is 4.5. So diesel exhaust fluid comes to you in a 2.5-gallon box. Well, if you think about it, we always put the refill point at half on DEF, but it's asking for less than 1 box of diesel exhaust fluid. The one thing we know about diesel exhaust fluid is that it crystallizes when it hits air. So we have set up a scenario where the most correct method would be to have boxes of DEF sitting in your fire station. You would fill it up. You'd always be left with a 1/2 gallon of DEF in the box, which you have to throw out, and it would always overflow every single time. And it would put diesel exhaust fluid all over the side of your fire engine, and it would crystallize, and it would be awful. Don't you love that system? Isn't that great? So over in Woodinville, we got a 55-gallon drum of diesel exhaust fluid that has a pump on it with a little, gas station trigger nozzle. And you just drive up and put it in, and it clicks off when it's full. So we have yet to design the system here for Bothell to figure out how to make it work best. But I have an idea that most likely we'll have a roll-around cart of DEF that is parked here at the station. And when it's time to add DEF, we just go ahead and roll it around and fill it up. Every new vehicle you buy from here on out is going to require DEF. So I think we'll wind up getting one of those systems, but stay tuned. As it is right now, know that this vehicle really should have DEF added. because it's down to 2.25 gallons, which is not a lot of DEF. If you were to go run and work a very hard-working fire, it might be dosing and actually be using a fair amount of diesel exhaust fluid.
What would be is there a way to predict what our normal consumption would be just if you're driving around, or like if it's under a load while pumping at a fire, how many hours?
Yeah, that is a very complicated thing that fleet managers are looking at, always trying to figure this one out, right? We know that diesel exhaust fluid consumption is parallel to diesel fuel consumption. They are really tracking along with each other, but it's the way in which you're using your vehicle, the heat with which your vehicle is maintaining, that directly impacts it. Our idle time is what kills us. So idle time cold engines uses a lot more DEF than otherwise.
I mean, would it be something that we would consider that you would actually take one of those 4-gallon boxes and put it on the rig itself?
No.
Okay.
No. Has anyone added DEF to these engines? Chances are that no one here has actually added DEF for the entire time you've had these vehicles. Quite likely, since November, you have not added DEF, is my guess. Maybe you have added it once. And the funny thing is I can plug it into my computer and tell you how much DEF they've consumed. But I also know that as we change things around a little bit, they'll start consuming less DEF. But that's a different story. All right, so DEF. When it hits half, we got to put DEF into it. If you're left with a small amount in the cardboard box, I'm asking you, put it in the dumpster, please, to save it, and then put crystallized DEF into the system later will cause damage.
We can put it in the 8 car if we wanted to, too.
Get rid of it into whatever vehicles you got. Just dump it. Yeah. You currently have 8 vehicles requiring DEF, and do you have boxes of DEF in station? Ooh. Okay. Let's make sure that you just have you already have them. Well, that's great. We just need to verify that that DEF is acceptable for your new engines, and then we have no big deal. Yeah, you just pour most of it in the engine and then the rest of it in the ambulance, and life is good. How often do you put DEF into your ambulances?
When the light comes on.
Bingo. Excellent.
Yeah, waving at us.
Yes. All right.
Will these go into lit mode? We need to ignore the DEF alarm?
No.
So low. Okay.
They will not go into limp mode. But that is not permission to not address it and not put DEF in at the half fill mark. All right. The engine is loud and sounds bad. What does that mean? Okay. So the DD13 engine is computer controlled, and it does the craziest things at times. And it sounds really bad at times. Let me start with a different story. Your Ford diesel engine is an 8-cylinder engine. And once you've gotten up to speed on I-5 and you're at a very low throttle, it actually cuts off 4 of your injectors and goes to a 4-cylinder engine. That's really cool. And you're burning half the fuel. And when you go up over the pass and you start coming down the other side, you take your foot off the accelerator pedal completely, it goes to a 0 fuel state. It turns off all fuel to the diesel engine. So as you hear the normal diesel engine, that's what they sound like. When you go over the pass, it goes and it turns off. All you hear is the tires. And then every once in a while it goes, and that's to keep the cylinder temperatures up. It will turn on certain diesel injectors to keep the cylinder temperatures up. So that is something that has been happening seamlessly without your knowledge for a very long time. Okay? When Detroit does it does it less seamlessly. You have a 6-cylinder engine and it doesn't go to 4, it goes to 5. It just chooses to turn off one of the injectors and it gets a miss. And you can hear the miss. And the engine will kind of, you'll be able to feel the miss The diesel engine has decided to turn off an injector because it's trying to burn less fuel, create less exhaust, and so it knows there's a miss. So when you hear the miss, know that it is a normal operating condition, and it is making a lot of weird, loud noises that are totally acceptable. Not pleasant, not exactly what we would like, but it's totally acceptable. Don't worry about it. Transmission maximum operating temperature 250. If you get a super hot transmission, basically switch it into neutral and it'll cool down quite quickly. Please use your secondary braking systems as much as possible. Be up in max, and that allows us to basically have cold brakes for when you're slamming on your panic stop, entering that intersection with someone blowing the intersection. Cold brakes stop faster. Your brakes will be colder if you're using your secondary braking system, your Jake brakes, to their maximum capability. The differential lock switch, you have it right up on top. Oh boy, you've got it. Understand that you lose some of your steering when that's activated, and if you use your steering, it will sometimes detonate the rear differential. When the differential lock is locked, both tires will spin the same number of revolutions. The only time that ever occurs is when you're driving straight forward. As soon as you start to try and turn, the rear axle will continue to try and go straight, so it'll pull your steering back. And if you are actually able to win with the steer axle, then one of your tires will put the energy into the rear differential that will detonate the rear differential.
Is there some talk about disabling that?
Ah,
I've heard that discussion.
excellent. So a local fire department has experienced a catastrophic situation with a switch like
Might be relatively close to us.
maybe relatively close to you, and it might be a very high likelihood that that department might actually do away with that switch. Now, I will be very straightforward with you. Those fire engines have more technology than yours do. Those fire engines also have automatic traction control, right? And roll stability control and electronic stability control, which means that when you stop on a hill of snow, as you hit your throttle and one wheel starts spinning, the automatic traction control will put the brakes on. And so that you don't need to lock your differentials, because that computer, for the most part, keeps control of all that. Your vehicle doesn't have that, does not have automatic traction control. So what I would recommend, no one likes to stop on a hill with snow, but the thing is, if you don't have the electronics, then I think you really need that switch. However, I think that switch should be guarded. Now, I have driven fire engines for many, many years, and I'm always looking at the road, and I hit switches without ever taking my eyes off the road, right? I'm always driving like this. And so if there's a switch up there that if I miss and hit it, it will detonate the rear axle, that would terrify the heck out of me. If I accidentally get the Opticom light on when I'm trying to get something else, that's not a big deal. But if I hit a diff lock, and it will instantly detonate the rear axle, it should have a lock on it so that you can't hit it. And I can put one of those on there easily.
That was the discussion, so entertain that idea.
Yeah, just put a lock on it. And that's super easy. And that will be my recommendation. All right, if you ford water, if you go through deep water, the water level, if it gets up to your hubs, that's the little thing with the sight glass on it. If it gets up to the hubs, let us know. And if you hit something, let us know. Please, please, please. We always hit something, right? You're not going to get fired, but let us know so that I can come or somebody can inspect underneath. So many times you could take this fire engine and just launch it off of something and land, and it's awesome, it's great, it's fantastic, but it can do damage that you can't see, that we have to take a look at. Okay. So in this portion of the class, the whole purpose of it is you are taking responsibility of this fire engine. You're taking responsibility of inspecting it on a daily inspection. And so I am here to introduce you to all the different things that you're inspecting and to answer any questions you might have. So one unique component of your brand new beautiful fire engine is the front suspension. Most fire engines that are built today have a solid front axle, and so with leaf springs. This does not. It has an independent front suspension. Keep going. Blaze on, blaze on. Bingo. And so my request is when you tip the cab, you raise the cab up. Try not to bury these hydraulic cylinders. Try not to go up until they're full extension and then keep running the pump. Also, do not lower the cab back down on that prop rod. The hydraulic cylinders are fantastic for holding that weight. The prop rod puts the cab into a bind, so don't ever drop it down on that prop rod. So underneath the cab, it looks very confusing, and I can talk endlessly about any of it, but really what I want you to see is there are some components that I'm kind of expecting you to look at on your daily inspection. And so as a whole, you can see this looks like a brand new, very expensive engine, right? And so what we're looking for is something that looks like it's changed. So if any of these bolts were to fall out, you would see that the paint is displaced. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for something that has changed. You don't have to know what it's called or what it does, but just if it doesn't look new. So dirty, let's wash it, but otherwise. Now, specifically the front suspension. This here is the anchor for the torque arm. So the horizontal arm that has what looks like rhino liner on it that moves forward up into the wishbones of your suspension. So the wishbone of the suspension is right here behind the tire. So you notice that there are no leaf springs. You notice that there isn't anything visible that is like a suspension. The actual suspension is that horizontal arm right there, the torque arm. So there is a lot of twisting force on that arm that is holding this suspension in place. I adjust the ride height of the fire engine. Once it's got all of its equipment on board, we'll put a crew of 3 on it, and then we'll weigh it. And then I will adjust the ride height on the fire engine by adjusting the screw that's on the far end of that torque arm. So, all of that said, I request this. Every shift, visualize that torque arm there. See how there is red paint on something that looks like rhino coat right here. And notice that there are no cracks in the paint. There's no cracks in the rhino lining. That this torque arm comes right up into the base of the wishbone suspension, and that it looks like the junction there with that black silicone looks clean, and there's nothing that looks wrong. So we're inspecting the suspension. That is the suspension that we're inspecting. If ever there was a crack in that, I'd want to know about it right away. Yeah. Alrighty. What else? What else can I tell you about vehicle inspection of this brand new fire engine? Any questions? Yeah.
If we come across cracks in that,
Yeah.
then out of service criteria.
Instantaneously, right where it sits. You notice one of your other fire engines kind of had a cracked leaf spring, and we kind of freaked out about it and said, no, it's out of service. Same thing. If there is deformity in the cover of that torque arm, it means that there might be a problem with the actual arm itself. And so we freak out. It would be, yeah, we don't want it to come apart.
Identical both sides.
Identical both sides. Yeah. What else? Lug nuts, yeah. So just in inspecting this very large tire, as a firefighter, you're looking to make sure you have enough tread. And that's super simple. There's a little thing in between. If it ever wears down to where those little blocks are, that's that wear point that's out of service. You're always looking at the side wall of the tire to ensure there are no bulges, cracks, tears. When we hit a curb, it will rip the rubber. If ultimately you open up the flap and you can see a cord, right? If you can see a cord, that's an out of service criteria. If you can't see a cord, then that's a note in Halligan in your new app, right? And it's still in service. Yeah? You come down to the rim, no cracks. Lug nuts. Now, how do you know the lug nut is tight? Yes. Radial runs that come out from the lug nut. If it is a steel rim, you'll have a rust trail that comes out like this. This is aluminum, so you'll actually have a gray trail that comes out like that. A radial trail that comes out is telling us that the lug nuts are loose. That would be a note in Halligan. What else? Yeah, you got to be where it's supposed to be. Yeah. And so you'll wind up doing a rig check if you're a driver every single shift. And so you want it to look the same pretty much on every single shift. If you see a change and if you see something that is of a concern, I also want you to have a document to know what out of service is, what out of service criteria is. So I'm going to kind of ask that NFPA 1911 Chapter 6 become a part of your life, and really accessible either through your computer or with a hard copy sitting at the dashboard, so that at 2 o'clock in the morning, when you actually hit that curb and you do have a flap on the tire and you're trying to remember what was out of service, you can actually look at that document and know whether it's an in-service or out-of-service criteria. What else? Yeah. Perfect. So let me just run through maybe the inside of this really quickly, just to give you a quick intro. As you look inside here, this is actually your foam pump, your Husky 3 system. People don't realize that. But as you start, that's that guy right in here. As you start looking through the engine compartment, this big thing that looks like a really expensive computer is a really expensive computer. And so you can wash inside here with a garden hose, but you don't really want to be pushing water directly into the really expensive computers. So as you look down here, there's a lot of wires coming into this thing. That's a really expensive computer. Oh, and that one. Oh, and that one. These are all really expensive computers. They're right next to the engine. And so you just have a very computerized vehicle. The exhaust right here has insulation around it. So when it gets super hot, we want to protect things that are around it from that heat. If you notice, there is a driveline grease zerks right next to the hot exhaust. I'm going to try and get a cover to put over that so that when you go into regen, you don't have a lot of smoke coming up from the exhaust. Every time we go into regen right now, we get smoke from right here because grease is getting over here onto the exhaust. It's coming from your U-joint over to the exhaust. We'll put a cover over that so you just don't get as much smoke. Beautiful transmission. As you're checking your vehicle, the level of fluid is checked by the computer, but you have a visual window right next to it. So long as you have transmission fluid, red fluid in the window, you know you're fine. You see the plastic bottle here for your coolant. You see that there's nothing in it. I need for there to always be coolant in this plastic bottle. Because if you look and there's coolant in the plastic bottle, you don't have to worry about the radiator up there. You don't have to find the window. If there's coolant here, you know there's coolant there. But if there's not coolant here, then somebody has to get up there and try and figure out. And since there's a big air filter in the way, it's very hard for you to be able to see. So we come along, power steering fluid. We've got coolant there. And what else can I tell you? It's a big diesel engine. I'd like for you to look up and just make sure that you still have a belt attached. There will be an emergency vehicle in the next year where the driver goes up and looks and there is no belt, believe it or not. Hopefully it never happens in your career, but just look. What else can I tell you? So vehicle inspection is simple. Look to see if it looks new. If it doesn't look new, try and find out why. If there is a trail of rust from a fastener, we know the fastener is loose. If there is a painted frame rail and there is a round circle where there's no paint, we know a fastener has fallen out. Those are the things we're looking for. If there is a liquid leaking from somewhere, those are the things we need to know. So in Halligan, you identify there's a liquid leak. Please do me the favor of researching what the liquid is. If it's underneath this thing, then you come up and you go, hey, there's a red liquid coming out of the power steering fluid reservoir, or something like that. Try and help us out. Depending on which liquid it is and how much it's leaking, depends on whether or not the vehicle's in service or out of service. We define a leak as a level 1, level 2, or level 3. A level 3 is if it's dripping on the ground. A level 1 says that there is a liquid visible. A level 2 says that visible liquid has turned into a sag, where it's, it's just got this sag. A level 3 is if the sag breaks loose and hits the ground. Okay? Well, that's kind of what I have for the visual inspection of the fire engine. If you have any questions about specifics, I'm more than happy to answer those. Otherwise, we're going to move into Halligan. So let me kind of explain. Forever and ever and ever, we've had a clipboard in the apparatus bay, and you have thrown a lot of check marks on that clipboard. You've signed your initials, and who knows what happens to that paperwork, where it goes. When you find items that you don't really like or that you're concerned about, you create another piece of paper that kind of floats off somewhere, and you don't really know what happens with that one. And ultimately, if whatever it was has been corrected and addressed, you can see that visually because it has changed on your vehicle. But as far as the information related to it, many times that doesn't even trickle down to you for the most part. So communication is what Halligan is about. It's not about specifically vehicle inspection. It's about communication. Communication at firefighter level doing inspections, up through chiefs that are ensuring that your vehicles are well maintained and correct and problems are fixed, and to mechanics like me who are doing the fixing and the information that we're creating. So that's kind of what Halligan was created to do, communicate at all those levels with complete transparency. Transparency means that every person is able to see all the data. Transparency, yeah. And also real time. So in the second that it occurs, it becomes visible. And it's all logged. So I was, before the class, sitting with one of your battalion chiefs, and we were talking about Halligan, and I was showing on my cell phone Halligan for Woodinville. And in that moment popped up an inspection that was just completed that actually had a red tag on it. And I looked at it and went, wow, huh. And we looked at the inspection, and on the inspection, on the fault issue, there was a picture of the pressure governor. The pressure governor that runs the fire pump was locked up. It didn't have a sensor on it, and it met out of service criteria. So as the firefighter noted that, it instantly created a work order, which instantly popped on my cell phone. And so I was looking and going, wow, look at that. You can see here the inspection. You can see here the work order, and you now can see the EVT walking and calling the fire chief. And so I walked out, and as I came back, the fire chief, within a couple of minutes, Chief Walgren over there, had moved it from a reported condition into a assigned condition, which is, hey, Paul, go fix this. So that all happened within 4 or 5 minutes of when the firefighter had done the inspection at a fire station over in Woodinville. That is what Halligan's all about, complete with a picture of the pressure governor so that I could actually read what it was saying. That's really huge because it's talking in code. So I'm the only one that can kind of understand that for the most part. Yeah?
So say you're out of area,
Yeah. Brush 131, while I was on deployment in California, was doing a daily inspection that I was getting real time instantly because they actually had Wi-Fi at base camp, and I was able to see it. They were running into problems, and I was able to instantly comment and respond to their issues real time as they were in fire camp.
Let's say you're out of area, say you're in Chihuahua at a wildfire.
Yeah, yeah. And I may have been on a beach in Italy responding to work orders in the past.
But if you don't have cell coverage, is there a
Yeah.
backup person?
Yeah, yeah. And so the beauty of the fire service is we have redundancy and depth. You have spare vehicles, you have spare firefighters, yeah, and we have spare mechanics and spare chiefs. And so everybody is allowed to go on vacation or disappear, and the system doesn't stop. The interesting thing, though, which is interesting, is that it doesn't matter where any of us are, right? So this morning, when that issue arose, when it developed, I was sitting at a chair in Bothell talking to a Bothell chief. I was notified of it, and the ops chief for Woodinville was in a meeting in somewhere else, and we were able to come up with a plan within 3 or 4 minutes, being nowhere in zone. So that's the interesting thing, yeah.
Can I ask just a little bit of a clarification there? So we don't have Wi-Fi, and we're putting in our data. Will the cell phone that we're using at that time,
Right.
will it won't be able to access the app at that
Yeah.
time, but will the phone have a certain amount of the capacity
Right.
to enter the data, and then when it makes contact later,
Yeah.
will hold, store, and then send the information in?
Yeah. Your question is Halligan impacted by the connectivity of the device you're trying to access it on? That is your question. And the answer is yes. Halligan is a cloud-based app. And so you have to have connectivity to the cloud in order for it to work. So for us, your computers on board your vehicles are always connected, so that's never an issue. For the most part, I would assume that all of your fire stations and most of Bothell, all of our cell phones, all have cell service, so that's not an issue. The reason why our brush truck down in California at a fire camp was on Wi-Fi is because there was no cell service. They didn't have a cell on wheels, a cow, there to support the base camp. They basically had Wi-Fi somehow hacked, created for them. So they were able to access it through Wi-Fi. So that was really quite amazing. So Halligan also is fuel logs. If Bothell wants to switch to use it as fuel logs, you're able to track any inventory. So your personal bunker gear, breathing apparatus. You can also run separate inventory inspections for your ambulances, for your engines. The beauty is that it's all visible and trackable. So every firefighter can just open up their cell phone, open up the laptop that's on the vehicle, and look at the complete cradle-to-grave history of that thing, that vehicle or whatever it is. So we are doing this for transparency of communication and for real-time responsiveness to your needs. That is the honest reason why we're doing it. So it is technology which for some will be a little bit more challenging than others. And so soon you'll learn it, and it will just be a quick and easy thing. So what I would like to do, so this is the laptop interface for Halligan. And thanks. This is access that most likely you'll never actually jump into. But really what it does is it shows all of your vehicles. And you can see Battalion 142. And then it also has your chassis number, 2415. And so it's a listing of all your apparatus. And in tickets, that's your work orders. And so we'll kind of explain the pathway with which I interface. When you find a fault on one of your inspections, it automatically generates a work order. And it automatically pops up over here on the reported side. And then we start getting involvement with chiefs who are assigning who the appropriate party is. And that will generate an email directly to that party. So say it's an SCBA issue, and MES is your supplier for SCBAs. Well, when they move it over to assigned, they tag support at MES, and it just sends them an email and says this is a work order, blah, blah, blah. We move it over into in repair as it's an ongoing repair, or it's scheduled over in for your next PM, or it's a warranty issue, or then jumps over into the closed items. So what I would like to do is I would like to get all of you up and running on Halligan. What that requires is this. I am going to ask for your email, and when I put you into the email here, it's going to send you a invitation into the Bothell Fire Department's Halligan. And so what you will do is you need to go to your app store, Google Apps, or what's the Apple version of it? Apple Store, and download the Halligan app. And so if you want to start with that, downloading the Halligan app, don't log in to the Halligan app until I can send you an invite. You want to access it through that portal. So
Are you saying on a personal phones or the ones for the rigs?
we will certainly do it on the ones for the rigs, but most everybody I know just would rather have it on their personal phones. Because when you're doing your rig check, you just pull out your phone, you do the rig check, boom, and it's done, and the phone goes away. So you don't have to do it on your own phone. But you certainly are invited to. Most folks wind up wanting to throw it there. Alrighty. So now, with that, if you get into Halligan, what I'd like to do is just play with it a little bit and just see how it works. So I know that the engines currently have a vehicle inspection detailed out to it. And so just why don't you go to one of the Pierces, one of the new Pierces, and let's begin a inspection on one of the Pierces.
Under Station Reserve.
Yeah, they're under the reserve station and new Pierce. And so when you first click on it, you'll see the data about the vehicle. So you've opened it up, and so if you open up one of them, you'll see underneath it, you'll see it's in service. You'll see that there are checklists available. Excuse me, that there's no tickets on it, that there is inventory tabs and equipment. So you can look at apparatus details, and there's no details actually pushed into it, but this is where details of fluids or something like that would be. Closed work orders, open.
Inventory information log fuel.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's go back to the, excuse me, golly, the original setting, and then let's start a checklist. So where it says start a check, to the left of the blue button. So go ahead and just start a check. Yep, I'm coming. And the reason why we're here is so that we can figure that one out.
Scroll down to your apparatus, and then you'll find, so just go to 8416 right here and go.
Pick your vehicle. Doesn't matter. Pick any vehicle. Yeah, and so this is where you'll get the information.
10, oh, shit. So go to 16. So go to 16. Take it there, then you go checklist.
Yeah, and that will identify the checklists that have already been done, but back up from here and go back to where you were. Okay, you just started your shift. And then what you do is you move up, and the first thing you do is you look to see if there are any work orders,
Yep.
right? And then what you do is you come down to where it says start a check.
Okay.
And so go ahead and hit start a check. Yeah. And so this is the daily NFPA 1911. So now we are beginning a check. Yeah, actually, why don't you stay here, and we're beginning a check. So the first thing is it says check for work, open work orders. That's what we did just before, right? We looked and we saw that it didn't have any work orders. And so go ahead and hit the check mark. Yeah, we already checked. It's all good. And then we enter in the mileage. So entering a bogus mileage and bogus hour meter. Now, please only do that in the classroom. We are tracking and trending your hour meters and your mileage for all sorts of different reporting issues. So it's very, very important. So now, here's the thing about Halligan. If you look at the next one, it says approach the vehicle, notice the general condition. And notice there's a whole paragraph of things, of opportunities, of things for you to look at, right? Now, in some departments, you just have a single checkbox that says notice general condition. In other departments, you have all the different things to look at, right? Really, if it says something on the list that you don't even have, it's not a big deal. So you're just looking at the general condition, you hit a check mark, and you just move right along. So if you have a question about that specific thing, you can hit the details button, and that will access where you can put notes. And if you want to actually put a picture in there, all you have to do is authorize it. It'll access your camera, and away you go. You can take pictures and sign them right in. I can see this thing. I'm not sure really if it's a bad thing or not. And you just take a picture of it. You just write right in there. I'm not sure about the status of this. You take a picture of it, and you'll quickly get an email back. Yeah, so you run on down through it, and it's a long list. But it's really just as simple as that. Go ahead.
Are responses given back to you in email or through a notification?
Now that we know this is all about communication, and it's got transparency, so if you have done the inspection, if there is an email in response to that, it will be emailed directly to you.
Okay.
Yeah, so you will get direct email replies. In addition, as the information is going out, depending on what it is, there will be an email that goes up to your support side. And so ultimately, I'll even wind up getting an email.
Okay.
Yeah. So if your activities, if you put a red X instead of the blue check, if you put a red X on something, it winds up automatically generating a work order. So the request is that as you put a red X on it, you give us a good enough explanation of what it is so that the system can respond appropriately. So if you're low on foam, low on Silvex, that obviously would not be a red X. That would be a note that just simply says we're 1 tub low on Silvex. So you can put a note in there through the details. So basically a red X means it pretty much meets an out of service criteria kind of thing. So as you do this a little bit more, you are still doing the exact same inspection you've always done. You're just documenting it differently, right? It's still the exact same thing. Now, you see a lot of verbiage in there, and you ask, where did that verbiage come from? This is a compliant inspection per NFPA. Most folks don't realize that NFPA 1911, which is the Vehicle Inspection and Maintenance Standard, which I am governed by, now governs you as a driver-operator. There is a driver-operator daily inspection in NFPA 1911. That is how this is populated with that information. Also the information by the manufacturer, Pierce. Pierce information is directly populated into this for your new fire engines. And also our Washington State EVIP information is also in this inspection form. Sir?
So currently, we do a daily inspection.
Yep.
Weekly inspection.
Yep.
Are we now just gonna go to one
Okay.
inspection?
That's an operational question, and I certainly do not create operational policy. However, I can tell you that this is a daily inspection, and the fire department can certainly also put an additional inspection list on that vehicle as a weekly. And you can put anything you want on it for a weekly. If it were a ladder, you could also put a 10-hour greasing thing in there. So when you started your inspection, you only had the choice of one NFPA daily, right? But if it were the ladder, you'd have a daily, you might have a weekly, you might have a monthly inventory, and you might actually have a quarterly greasing or something like that. Yeah?
Can you edit what the daily requirements are and still be in compliance?
That there is the question. We know that this inspection form is compliant, yeah, with all of the standards. Can it be modified and still maintain compliance? You have to look at that very specifically. If you look at the letter of the law, the inspection has to occur on a daily basis, only on a vehicle that basically has a crew assigned to it on a daily basis. The letter of the law says weekly or within 24 hours of a response. And if you think about that, every one of your vehicles, for the most part, that's assigned goes on a response. However, it's only held to weekly. The reserve rig,
Because I'm seeing this more so as almost like one of our weekly checks. So if it was non-compliant, but it was still a daily check to where it was thorough enough, and you're complying with that weekly check.
yeah.
Again, operational.
Yeah. Yeah, so one of the unfortunate things I have to tell you is most likely your daily operations today are not compliant.
Okay.
Yeah, and so one of my jobs as a fleet manager is to push you towards compliance. That is my unfortunate job, sir.
The criteria that you're picking from?
Yes.
Can you customize that? Because like right now, we have a car, engine, and aerial.
Yeah.
They're gonna be looked at, and like, I'm looking at this, he's got DEF.
Yeah.
Or the A car doesn't have air brakes.
Yes, and so you are a little ahead of me. I didn't get the okay to go do Halligan until just a couple of days ago, and so I don't have Halligan built. Your ambulances obviously would have a very different inspection, which is not populated in there yet. And the correct inspection for your ambulances with or without DEF would be adjusted so that every inspection that's going to be in here, I promise within the next month or something, will be very accurate, very compliant, it's altogether possible that how we pair this thing up might be slightly different than what it presents today, in the sense that maybe if the command staff is comfortable with something happening on a weekly basis instead of a daily basis, if the command staff is comfortable with it, Halligan will reflect that.
So like the air brake check, they can decide if they want to do that.
Any specifics of anything can be modified according, obviously, to the command staff. Yeah, you have a chain of command, and it will just float down the chain, and Halligan will reflect whatever your policies are. Yeah. So we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the inspections that are in it right now are not very accurate, except for your two new Pierces. Yeah, this is the Pierce inspection that came across. Because it has right in it the Pierce torsion bars. We know that your two new Pierces are the only ones that have those torque bars. Yeah, what else can I tell you? Yeah, so finish your inspection and go ahead and submit it. And please, somebody put a red X on something. Take your inspection, hit a red X on something, and give me a fail. I want to show you how a fail works. Oh, you know, I could actually, well, if someone is creative enough, try and put a fail on it and take a picture.
There you go. It's coming to you.
Nice. So you did your daily inspection. You just started your shift. Now you run for coffee. And what you see is I am on the home screen. So up here, I'm on the home screen. And that's the daily log. For hundreds of years, we've had a logbook at the front of the fire station that when you came in as a firefighter, you read the logbook to see what has happened. This is your logbook. Everything that happens at Bothell Fire from here on out is going to have this logbook that comes through. So Nick has just completed a inspection for 8416, 42 passing, 0 failing, 3 skipped. And so we're assuming at this point that the 3 skipped were because they didn't even apply to that vehicle. That's fine, no worries. So as I move down, I see that Chad did a daily on 8416, and we have 0 passing, 1 failing, and 44 skipped. When I read that, what I understand is Chad's trying to communicate with me. Chad's saying, hey, I got an issue. And he says that he has checked that the parking brakes are set. That is the box that he checked a red X on, and he says it doesn't stop in 6 feet. Copy that. Well, when he did that, notice that it popped over here. I came down to tickets, and it popped a work order, and it's sitting in reported. And so if I click on that work order, it will pop up, and we can see any history about it. We know exactly when it was created, and who it was reported by, and any of that information. So it also generated an email to my phone, if it still works, and it actually sent me an email. So the really fun part is that email can be responded to real time with any data, and I would send back, okay, Chad, how many feet does it stop in? And so we would just have a good transparent communication with all that. If ultimately I look at that and I go, well, gosh, I would just move it and bring it over into closed and close it. Now, honestly, let's look at a real one. That's all bogus, right? But let's look at this one.
So when you close it, does it generate an email back to the person?
It has been closed.
Okay.
Yeah, there'll be an email goes right to Chad.
Okay, and to me?
And you. Yeah, it should be. Yeah. So let me actually go through a real work order. Welcome. A real work order that actually occurred. This one was generated because of the lights that were on the dashboard, right? And so you notice down here, you can see the communication that we have throughout. So all of that communication is basically between Dave Monahan and myself concerning this specific issue of the lights. I'm basically saying that I found it, I verified it and documented that yes, in fact, you had all those lights and horns on. And what I did was I ran a regen, right? But that becomes a part of that vehicle. That work order will just kind of stay there. All the activity that we're doing right now, I'm going to actually delete off. All your inspections, I'm going to just delete off. So no worries. Notice though that at the login where you're at, you cannot delete. There's only a couple of us that can actually delete stuff that are inside there. Now, honestly, if it's a you started an inspection on a wrong vehicle and you just left it and you went to the correct one, we'll just clean all that up and delete it all off. No worries. What can I tell you? What else?
So can you have more than one person doing a check?
Yes. So here's the thing. Halligan is getting better and better all the time. So I know that you're not ALS, but so when an ALS ambulance is inspected, right, the paramedics have to put their names on the narcotics. And so Halligan is set up so that when you're doing inventory, a daily inventory on an ambulance, 2 or 3 people can be doing it all simultaneously, all in the same inspection and all knocking through it. For the inspections for a fire engine that you're doing currently, you cannot all log on to the same inspection. For an ambulance, aid car, you will, aid car, yeah. So the important part is you download the app, but you access it the first time through your email that you're about to receive. It will first ask you to create a password, and that will get you into the Bothell Halligan, as opposed to Lost in Never Never Land. So we know that we are going to switch over to Halligan. And we don't have a definition of when that's going to happen, but really it should happen pretty much right away. With your new Pierces, they have not received an inspection. We have not documented an inspection, and you've been driving them. So my request is that if you're driving it, you inspect it. So you'll get further direction operationally down the road from your officers. But you got to start inspecting those Pierces and start creating, the work orders so they can get addressed and all that jazz. What else can I tell you? Yeah. So as you first get into it, you'll see it probably gives you a bogus PPE. It probably gives you bunker gear as you turn on your Halligan. So at some point we'll start increasing. The Halligan app is very deep. There's a lot of stuff in it. One of the things before you leave I need to let you know about is you have complete control over how much transparency you have. You probably don't really want to know when everybody is doing their inspections. You probably don't want to know a large amount of information. So you can change your profile in it very easily to limit any communication to either your station, you log into just your station, or maybe even to no notifications at all. Maybe you just want it so you can access in and gain the information when you want it. So it doesn't actually, they're called push notifications. You know, when your friends on Facebook go ahead and say something, there's a push notification that tells you that somebody's saying something. Maybe you don't want that information from Halligan. So you have control over that, over your profile. So you can turn on or off any of those functions. So you have control over what station you are logged into. You can be all stations, all activity, or a very specific station, whatever it is.
Or even the rigs, maybe 1 or 2 rigs.
Say it again?
Can you also just do a couple of rigs if you know you always drive those 2 rigs?
No, you can't do just a rig level. Yeah. But really what I would recommend is if you want to limit the intrusion of Halligan into your life, you just turn off all notifications. So that ultimately, when it's time to do a rig check, you pull out your phone, you log into Halligan very quickly, and then you look at the vehicle, engine 142, that you're supposed to inspect. And you just go right to engine 142 and you're all stations. You just click on that. And as you look at it, you look and see, hey, there's no work orders. Hey, there's no notes. And you just click on the new inspection. You basically put the phone back into your pocket. You do the inspection as you always have, and then you sit down in the driver's seat, you log in the fuel levels, odometers, hour meters, and stuff like that, and you submit it and you're done. It's just that simple. It is basically the same inspection you've always done. It's how you're logging it. Instead of putting check marks on a piece of paper, You're actually putting check marks onto a cell phone.
Do work orders get submitted through this, or do we still do them?
Yeah, so in our transitional period, there is no right answer to that question. So we are in transition, and it's like the transitional phase of any firefighting, right? So as we're transitioning to defensive, there are still resources interior, but we're moving in that direction, right? So we are transitioning, and so I don't know what the correct answer is.
So until
So I can tell you this much. I can tell you that your 2 brand new Pierces are my responsibility. I can tell you every other rolling stock that you have are Redmond Fire's responsibility for a couple more months. And then they become maybe your city shop's responsibility or my responsibility. So the program is very dynamic, and Halligan will kind of reflect that. Halligan is the best thing right now in a dynamic rolling program, because as soon as the work order is popped, then the chiefs get to decide, well, this needs to be addressed, and they will decide who is the most appropriate person, and then that will generate the email. So that's pretty cool. What else?
How do you change your profile on this thing?
Nice. Yeah, exactly. How do I get control of this thing quick? So if you go back to where you are, and the honest answer is on a computer. You can't do it through your app. You have to log in on your computer. Let me show you. Go to Safari and log in through Safari instead of the app.
We went through the settings and just turned off notifications.
Yeah, where in the app or in Safari?
Well, so, no, I mean, if you go to settings and you go down to
Oh,
I turn notifications off here.
that is a backdoor.
So notifications off, or I can turn.
You're a tech-savvy person, and you have been very effective.
Chad showed me.
Yeah. Let me show you the method that we normally recommend. So if you look, if I can get everybody's attention just for 1 second. So we have lots of different control. And so directly how you control notifications, there's many different ways of dealing with it. At the phone level, you can just wall off Halligan. Absolutely. And that's really, really effective. The other way is you can also control Halligan in what it's actually sending at you, right? And so I'm logged in on the desktop, right? And so notice that my name is over here and settings is over here. And so on the desktop, not in the app, but the desktop, if you jump into your own settings and account, as you look down, you have these green toggles. This is your notifications. So the screen is awful and you can't really see it, but these are your notifications that you have control of. So it's expiring inventory, apparatus checks overdue, apparatus service change, apparatus checks complete, and department updates. So you have mobile push notifications, which is over on the right-hand side. That's it popping up on your cell phone. And the one to the left is email. You'll receive an email. So we don't use inventory, so I would just turn that off. Checks overdue, that is more important to a chief level person. The apparatus service changes. Now me, as your fleet manager guy, I really want to know when you take a rig out of service, right? So I'm going to leave push notifications and email on for apparatus service changes. So the apparatus checks complete, I actually look at them by email, but I don't want my telephone to bling every time you actually complete a apparatus check. So department updates, I go ahead and leave both of those on because I want to know about that. So this is how I modify my notifications. You could just turn everything off if you wanted. So that way it limits what Halligan is pushing in your direction. Or you can also just turn off your cell phone and tell it to ignore Halligan. Both are totally acceptable. What else? Yeah.
It's pushing when you're off duty, obviously.
Bingo. Bingo. Yes. It is real time, 24/7, 365, complete transparency.
So if you're logged out though, it's still pushing.
If your Halligan app is on your device, your Halligan app will receive the push notification. So how your cell phone specifically is tailored to receive push notifications for apps is whether or not you will get a beep beep, engine 142 is out of service.
Okay.
Is there an estimated time when this thing's gonna go live for us?
It just went live.
It just went live.
Right now, it's live on the Pierce engines. So please, if you're driving it, please do an inspection.
Or did Dave and Joe give you an indication when we're gonna go back to do the work on all our other apparatus to get those in the system?
I know that your other apparatus are in the system. It was late last night that I got actually inspections entered in for your vehicles. I just pumped them.
Do 24-15 command rig, it wouldn't let you do anything.
Yeah, no inspection in on it yet. I think probably within the next day or two, I will have inspections in for all of those. And so I believe they want to go live as soon as possible on it. And your command rig will be the easiest one out there. Yeah, yeah. Again,
Just easier for all those active AC candidates. That's right.
yes,
You know, they can only learn so much.
yeah.
Brain overflow.
So I guess one last note is if you're using the computer that's on the vehicle, just double check to see who's logged in, right? So if someone is logged in already into the computer into Halligan, then the inspection that you perform will be done in their name. So
What's the website, www.
Halligan.
Halligan.com?
App Halligan. Yeah, you just Google Halligan inspection, and it'll take you right there.
In fact, actually, we want to set up a shortcut on the desktop.
Bless you. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here. Thank you kindly. Questions, just no worries, just email or whatever.